The announcement echoed again. Final boarding for Flight 317, and my father still hadn't come back. "Just sit here," he'd said to Grandpa, easing him into a leather chair near the glass wall. "We'll go check in and come right back." Grandpa nodded, trusting. He always trusted. I watched the departure board flicker. 10 minutes, then 20. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. That's when the silence sharpened into something deliberate. I looked at Grandpa. His hands were folded neatly on his cane. His eyes were scanning faces that weren't there. "Where did they go?" he asked softly. That was the moment I understood. They hadn't gone to check in. They had gone to leave. They hadn't always been monsters. My father used to carry Grandpa on his shoulders in old photos, both of them laughing, the past frozen before ALZHEIMER'S started stealing pieces. My mother used to remind me to call Grandpa every Sunday. Family meant something once, or maybe I only wanted to believe it did. The diagnosis changed everything. Care became inconvenient. Medical bills became an argument. Grandpa's confusion became an embarrassment. And the inheritance, quietly, greedily, became the only thing they could still see clearly. They told me we were all traveling together, a fresh start. I didn't realize their version of fresh meant disposable. I should have seen it sooner. The one-way tickets, the missing return confirmations, the way my father wouldn't meet my eyes when Grandpa asked if we'd all sit together on the plane. By the time the truth landed, it hit like ice water. I told Grandpa I was going to get us coffee. Then I ran. I found him exactly where they'd left him, still sitting straight, still patient, still trusting a world that no longer deserved it. A security guard hovered nearby, unsure. Grandpa was explaining, politely, repeatedly, that his son would be back any minute now. I knelt in front of him and took his hands. "They went ahead," I said, "but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He studied my face, searching for familiarity. Then relief washed over him like a tide. "Good," he said. "I didn't like being alone." Something inside me hardened permanently. That night, while Grandpa slept under hospital lights, I made a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't confront them right away. I would plan. Over the next year, I learned more than they ever thought I was capable of. I became Grandpa's legal guardian, quietly. I documented everything: the abandonment, the medical neglect, the financial irregularities. I learned how trusts worked, how voting rights worked, how a signature from a man deemed confused could still move mountains if handled correctly. They underestimated two things: my patience and Grandpa's clarity in moments that mattered. On good days, he remembered everything, including who had left him behind. The company had always been my father's crown jewel, generations old, built on Grandpa's sacrifices. They treated it like an inheritance waiting to be claimed. What they didn't know was that Grandpa still held controlling interest through a retirement trust, one they assumed would transfer automatically once he was put somewhere. They never asked where he went. They never checked. They never imagined I'd be the one sitting beside him as he signed the final documents, lucid, calm, deliberate. "Are you sure?" I asked him once. He looked at me with a clarity that broke my heart. "They left me," he said. "You didn't." A year later, I stood in a glass-walled office across from my father's CEO desk. "You're outdated. We're done here," he hissed, leaning back like a man untouchable. I replied quietly, "Understood." That was the moment the retirement trust activated its voting rights. By Monday morning, the board convened an emergency meeting. The question echoed around the table, confused, panicked, incredulous. Who just fired the person who owns 76% of the shares? My father's face drained of color as the answer slid across the table in black ink. My name. The confrontation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My mother cried. My father shouted. They talked about betrayal, about family, about how I'd ruined everything. I listened. Then I slid one final document forward. Airport security footage, timestamps, the abandonment report. You left him, I said, at an airport, alone, sick, confused. Silence. I simply made sure you left with nothing. Security escorted them out of the building their family name no longer belonged to. Grandpa didn't remember the board meeting, but he remembered this. We sat on a bench outside the building later, sunlight warming his hands. "Did I do okay?" he asked. I smiled. "You did great." He nodded, satisfied, then leaned back, peaceful. "I don't regret what I did. Revenge doesn't always look like fire and shouting. Sometimes it looks like paperwork, patience, and waiting for the right moment to speak one quiet word. Understood."